Hey everyone, welcome back if you're returning and welcome if you're new. My most recent video was a quick update on this very car, my 2006 Accord 66, covering some of the nuances and disadvantages of owning a car that's one, pretty low mileage, and two, that spent most of its life up north. Like I mentioned in that last video, every car that I've owned has either come from South Carolina or Georgia, whereas this one came from Ohio, so it's been exposed to things like snow and salt. Nonetheless, I won't go into too much detail because that previous video covers, everything specific. Nonetheless, I was able to get 4 new tires put in the car. One thing that I did mention in that video was the fact that the front tires were on the car since 2011 and the back tires were on there since 2018. So if I had to guess why this car has such low mileage, is because it did sit for a while. When it comes to why, not really sure. Probably won't ever find out because the Carfax doesn't really go into too much detail about that either. Nonetheless, in addition to getting those 4 new tires, I did get a quick oil change, filter change done yesterday. And of course, with that, they do a full inspection as well, excuse me. And I can say that fortunately, the car did, I wouldn't say pass with flying colors, but most things that I was concerned about as far as functionality were given the okay. The 2 things that it was dinged for was, one, the rust that's on the underbody, which I already knew about. It wasn't a surprise. My one concern and question for them was there anything at this point that was so rusty that it's going to impact the functionality? And fortunately, I can say that that response was a no. The other thing was just the fact that the cabin air filter needs to be changed, and I can do that myself, so no big deal either. All of that stuff aside, even with the flaws that this car does have, I'm still very happy to own an example of a car that represents what Honda used to be and most likely will never be again. This is a 2006 model year, built in April of 2005. So at the time, they would have had the 6-speed Accord Coupe along with the sedan, the Acura RSX Type S, just on the cusp of the TL Type S, Civic Si, so on and so forth. And that's not even counting the cars that you could option with the 5-speed manual at the more, base model levels. Nonetheless, again, Honda is a company, it's a corporation, so profitability has to be their main concern. So a car like this truly would not be very profitable in today's market. That being said, it makes me even more glad to say I own an example, again, of one that has been relatively maintained for the most part. Again, the fact that mine is lower mileage is not necessarily too much of a bragging right, because with it being lower mileage, it also said a little bit, and has kind of left me with some issues that a higher mileage car might not have experienced. Nonetheless, it's still a great car. I still love the absolute crap out of it. It is my 4th Honda Accord, and pretty much all of those have been chronicled on this channel from beginning to end. And of course, anything that I add to the car, I try to make sure that it's as tasteful and as close to OEM Plus as possible. So the dark housing headlights as well as the fog lights are things that I've added in my time of ownership. And all of those bulbs have been upgraded to LEDs as well. When this car was brand new, I guess the dealer or the original owner did not opt for any dealer installed accessories. So I've had to add those myself. That includes the sunroof visor as well as the rear spoiler. And then the taillights are another thing that I've upgraded. On the 06 to 07 Accord Hybrid, these taillights would have been standard. Since I clearly do not have a hybrid, I had to order these myself, got them installed, and that's probably one of my favorite upgrades to the car that I've done. Now, when it comes to things that are questionable, I'll be honest, this VTEC sticker, not really a fan of it at this point. I didn't expect it to be as pronounced or as large as it is. For example, I have something similar on my 9th gen Accord, but this one is really, really small to the point that it can fit in that little space right there. I definitely preferred that one, and I wish that this one would have been a similar size. Nonetheless, it's there. I don't truly intend on taking it off unless I feel like it's bothering me that much. Aside from that, the JDM style, and of course that's quote unquote, but the JDM style window visors, this is my 2nd set of these. The original adhesive was not very strong, so this time I made sure to kind of reinforce them with my own 3M tape. Now, I think a shining example of just how well this car has been kept would be the condition of the interior. Before I dive into that, you can see that the car was originally sold by Sunnyside Honda, so somewhere in Ohio. And I think earlier I said the car was built in April of 2005. I can correct myself and say that it was built in October of 2005, which I guess does make a whole lot more sense. Nonetheless, you can see that the condition of the door cards, the seats, steering wheel, so on and so forth, are all pretty much perfect. One thing that is an exception would be the shift knob. I want to say that this would have been outlined in red on top of the shift pattern. Could be wrong, but I believe that was the case. But that's a pretty minor detail, and again, it's still in pretty much good condition. Of course, it being the 6.6, it has the full carbon fiber trim in the center stack, as well as on the door cars as well, both front and back seats. If I had to guess, I'm going to say that this car was probably owned by an older person, maybe. It'll kind of make sense out of the low mileage as well as the condition of, again, the interior and especially the back seats, because I would say that's pretty much a 10 out of 10 or close to it. The little folder, something that I borrowed from Tyson Hughes, actually was keeping records of all of the maintenance and stuff for my cars. So this one is pretty small because I've only had the car for about a year, but my 2014 Accord has racked up an entire binder. Now, of course, this being a family sedan at its core, it does have a great trunk space, but I really wanted to look back here because the car does still have the original rubber floor mats. I guess that was the one dealer option that the original owner did opt for. And then in here, it does still retain the original jack as well. Then the spare tire is located underneath that storage space. The car does still retain all of its original owner's literature, as well as the original window sticker. Car would have been $27,850 altogether. I want to say when this car was brand new, I think one of the complaints was the fact that it was a bit too expensive, especially if you were to cross shop it with something like the A-Spec Acura TL or that following model year, the TL Type S. Nonetheless, given the nature of the car, I don't think that high sales was necessarily a goal from the get-go. This car was produced in pretty low numbers as well. If we had to make a modern day comparison, the Tension Accord 2.0 6-speed would be the closest. And if you adjust that price for inflation, I want to say the cost of that car would fall right in line. Lastly, moving underneath the hood very quickly, hood struts are actually one of the things that I've replaced in the past few months, but it reveals the J30A4, I want to say. In the past, I think I said A4 and A5. Nonetheless, it's a J30, so a 3-liter single red cam V6 with VTEC. In this particular application, it's making 244 horsepower, I want to say. It's a pretty proven, old school, very reliable engine. It is driven by a timing belt. You can either take that as a plus or a minus. I don't think it's a reason not to buy a car that has this engine, though. I think the closest modern day application would be the J35 that's used in the Passport, Ridgeline, and Odyssey. As the Pilot and MDX have switched over to a newer non-VTEC J35. Nonetheless, you can see on mine that rust does kind of start to rear its ugly head. My concern, like I mentioned in that past video, is when it comes to replacing things like the timing belt, I would hate to be in a position where the rust prevents that from being either feasible or completely possible. But I guess we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there. guess my only closing thoughts would just be reiterating the fact that I'm happy to own an example of a car that represents what the brand once was. Anytime, let's say, Motor Trend posts a picture of an upcoming Accord, the comments are always written with, well, the Accord should be all-wheel drive, have a V6, and have a 6-speed manual. And I definitely could buy into the all-wheel drive thing to make it more competitive with the Camry. But if we truly think about it, a family sedan that has a 6-speed and a V6 is simply not going to sell at this point. And if enthusiasts were the main focus of the automotive industry, then yeah, that would be reasonable. But we have to remember that that's not the case. And if they're not going to make it again, I am happy that I have an example of when they did. And I'm going to hold on to mine for as long as I possibly can. I appreciate you for watching. Have a good one.